My name is Major Nina Calloway. I am 38 years old. I have been a military police officer for 14 years. And on a Wednesday morning in March, I was called to a civilian mortuary 12 kilometers from Hadfield Installation to assist in the identification of a body found near the installation perimeter. The body had been discovered by a maintenance crew 3 days earlier. Male, estimated age mid-20s, no identification, physical description consistent with military personnel, build, fitness indicators, a particular kind of physical conditioning that the civilian pathologist had noted in her preliminary report. I had been called because the description was consistent with a missing persons file I had filed 18 months ago. Private Owen Hale, 23 years old at the time of disappearance, reported missing from Hadfield Installation on a Thursday in September. The investigation had found no trace of him, no evidence of foul play, no evidence of departure. He had been at morning parade and had not been at evening roll call, and had not been found in the 18 months between those two moments. I had filed that report. I had run that investigation. I had lived with the unresolved weight of it for 18 months. I drove to the mortuary. I looked at the body. The physical description was consistent: age, build, height, coloring, close enough that I understood immediately why the file had been pulled. I authorized the DNA comparison. The result came back on Friday. The DNA was Owen Hale's, and Owen Hale's DNA profile was flagged in the system as belonging to a living person with an active service record.
Let me tell you what the DNA result meant. It did not mean the body was Owen Hale. It meant that Owen Hale's DNA had been found on the body. Those are different things. The distinction matters. And it took me approximately 4 minutes of sitting very still in my office on Friday morning to move from the first reading to the second. A person's DNA can be present on a body without the body being that person. Transfer, contact, deliberate placement. Owen Hale's profile was flagged as active, flagged as belonging to a living service record. The system does not flag dead soldiers as living. It had flagged Owen because Owen's record had never been formally closed, missing, not deceased, no body previously found, and because the DNA it had matched was a profile that existed in a living service record. The body in the mortuary was not Owen Hale. Someone had put Owen Hale's DNA on it. I called Dr. Catherine Brent. Dr. Catherine Brent was the forensic specialist attached to the Military Investigations Division. She had been working with me on the identification since Wednesday. I told her what I was thinking. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Contamination or deliberate placement?" I said, "The physical description is too close for this to be random. Someone chose this body specifically." She said, "If it was deliberate placement, we are looking at access to a biological sample from Owen Hale's medical record, blood typing, annual health assessment, something taken before he disappeared." I said, "Who had that access?" She said, "Medical staff, his immediate commanding officer, unit welfare, anyone with legitimate reason to access his health file in the 12 months before he went missing." I said, "Narrow it." She said, "I can pull the access log for his file, everyone who opened it in the relevant period." I said, "Do that." She did it. The access log had 4 names. One of them was Sergeant Lee Whitmore. The object at the center of everything was the access log. 4 names, 1 timestamp. Sergeant Whitmore had accessed Owen Hale's health file 11 days before Owen disappeared, not during a period when Whitmore would have had routine reason to access it, not in connection with any documented welfare or administrative task. 11 days before Owen went missing. Whitmore was still in my unit. He had been there for 3 years. He was a good soldier, precise, reliable, the kind of sergeant who noticed things and handled them quietly. I had trusted him. I sat with his name on the access log for a long time. Then I went to find him. I want to pause here, because walking across a base on a Friday afternoon to speak to a sergeant I had trusted for 3 years about a DNA result that connected him to an 18-month-old disappearance and an unidentified body in a civilian mortuary is the moment this story became something I had not been prepared for. The investigation I had filed 18 months ago had been the only open case I had ever failed to resolve. It was about to resolve. I was not certain I was prepared for what the resolution looked like. If you have ever walked toward an answer you were not sure you wanted, drop a comment below and subscribe right now, because what Whitmore told me when I found him and what had actually happened to Private Owen Hale is the part that changed everything I thought I understood about the 18 months.
Whitmore. He was in the vehicle maintenance bay when I found him. He saw me coming across the yard and he stopped what he was doing and he waited. Not with the body language of someone caught, with the body language of someone who has been waiting for a specific person to arrive for a very long time. I told him what I had found, the body, the DNA, the access log. He listened without interrupting. When he finished, he said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Is Owen alive?" Not, "Am I in trouble?" Not, "I can explain." The first thing he said was, "Is Owen alive?" I said, "I don't know. That is what I need you to tell me." He told me. What Whitmore told me. 18 months ago, Owen Hale had come to Whitmore with something he had seen, something he had not known what to do with and had not known who to trust with. Owen had been assigned to a supply inventory task at the installation's restricted storage facility. During that task, he had found a discrepancy. Equipment that was listed as present was not present. A systematic discrepancy, not a clerical error. He had checked twice. He had documented it. He had then made the mistake of reporting it to his immediate superior. His immediate superior was Captain Brian Soule. Soule had thanked Owen for the report, had told him he would look into it, had asked Owen to keep the matter to himself while the review was conducted. Owen had kept it to himself. 3 days later, someone had broken into Owen's quarters and had gone through his personal documentation. Nothing had been taken, but the documentation of the discrepancy, the notes Owen had made, was gone. Owen had come to Whitmore because he did not know what else to do, and because he trusted Whitmore in the way that junior soldiers sometimes trust a specific sergeant before they trust anyone else. Whitmore had listened, had understood immediately what Owen's situation was, had spent 48 hours thinking about what to do, and then he had done something that had nothing to do with the official channels. What Whitmore had done, he had a contact, a former colleague who had left the Army and was working in civilian logistics, a person entirely outside the military system and therefore outside the reach of anyone within it. He had spent 2 weeks quietly arranging things, a civilian identity, a location outside the country, a way out that would look, from the inside, like a disappearance rather than a departure. Owen had agreed to it. He had understood the risk of staying and had chosen the risk of going. 11 days before Owen left, Whitmore had accessed Owen's health file and had obtained what he needed. What he had accessed 11 days before Owen left was Owen's documented DNA profile, the record of his genetic markers from his annual health assessment. He had taken that documentation as insurance, a record of Owen's physical identity in case it was ever needed. 18 months later, when the body appeared near the installation, Whitmore had used that documented profile to source a compatible biological sample through a contact outside the unit, someone with access to biological material he could not obtain himself. The profile had told him what to match. The contact had provided what he needed to match it. The body near the installation had been discovered by chance, a civilian, unconnected, whose death near the perimeter had triggered the missing persons comparison.
Whitmore had understood immediately what would happen when the physical description comparison was run. The description was close enough to Owen's that a full forensic workup was inevitable. He had gone to the mortuary before the formal identification process had begun and had introduced the sample, not to muddy the result, to close the case permanently. A clean DNA match reading as Owen Hale, deceased, found near the installation, would end the missing persons file. No active search, no further investigation. Owen officially dead and safely gone.
What Whitmore had not known was that Owen's service record had never been formally closed, that his DNA profile remained flagged as active, that the system would not return a clean death match. It would return an anomalous result flagging a living person's profile against a body. The administrative detail that undid his plan was one he could not have anticipated. He said, "I knew it was wrong. I knew what I was doing to the investigation. I did it because the alternative was Owen being found before he was safe." He said it directly, without apology, but also without defiance, as a statement of what he had done and why. Captain Brian Soule. I will not detail the full investigation here. Some of it is still subject to proceedings. What I can tell you is that the equipment discrepancy Owen had documented was real. Soule had been diverting materials from the installation's restricted facility for 14 months before Owen found the discrepancy. The investigation, which accelerated significantly once Owen's account was available, found the full scope of the scheme within 8 weeks. Soule was arrested. He was charged with theft of military equipment, conspiracy, and abuse of authority. He pleaded not guilty. The trial lasted 6 weeks. He was convicted on all charges. He is serving 9 years.
The official channel Owen had used. The report Owen had made to Soule had been the only official report he had filed. There had been no record of it. Soule had ensured that. When I reviewed the reporting chain, I found no trace of Owen's account reaching anyone beyond Soule. The system had failed Owen before Owen had disappeared. That is not a comfortable thing to put in a report. I put it in the report. Owen Hale. He was alive. Finding him took 6 weeks and required cooperation between the Military Investigations Division and civilian authorities in a country I am not authorized to name. When the cooperation had been established and the contact had been made, Owen had chosen to return. He was 24 years old by the time I met him. He had been living under a different name for 18 months. He looked like someone who had been careful for a long time and was not yet certain that the carefulness was over. He came back. He gave his account. His account was consistent with everything Whitmore had told me and everything the investigation had established. He received a formal apology from the institution for the failure of the reporting chain that had left him without recourse. The apology was made in writing. It was not nothing. It was also not enough.
Whitmore. He was charged with interfering with a military investigation and misuse of medical records. He had cooperated completely. His actions, however irregular, had preserved the key witness in a case that had resulted in the conviction of an officer running an 18-month diversion scheme from a restricted facility. The court-martial considered that weight carefully. He received a formal reprimand and a reduction in rank. He was not discharged. He is still serving. I have complicated feelings about that outcome. I have not resolved them. I do not think they are meant to be resolved cleanly. The access log. 4 names, 1 timestamp. Sergeant Whitmore's entry 11 days before Owen Hale disappeared. The piece of paper that opened everything. It is in the evidence archive now, alongside Owen's original discrepancy documentation and the full investigation record. The missing persons file I opened 18 months ago has been closed. Not in the way I had hoped it would close when I opened it, but closed. Here is what a DNA result and an access log taught me. When the official channels fail someone, they do not always wait for the official channels to try again.
Sometimes they find a sergeant they trust. Sometimes the sergeant does something outside the boundaries of what is sanctioned, because the boundaries of what is sanctioned have already failed to protect the person inside them. That is not an endorsement of what Whitmore did. It is an acknowledgement of why he did it. The system failed Owen Hale before Whitmore did anything irregular. That sequence matters. It does not excuse the irregularity, but it explains the desperation that produced it. I put that in the report too. The cases I remember most are not always the ones that resolved cleanly. This one will stay with me for a long time. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. The DNA was his. The body was not. She followed the thread until she found him.